You're watching Force 13's live streaming service. Force 13 Live returns after a rather short break that we've been away for a day or two, but we've still got the same storms that we were tracking a few days ago, and Beta is the main US threat, and Hurricane Teddy still out there as well as a Category 2. There are tropical storm warnings in Bermuda and also for large parts of the Texas coast, along with storm surge warnings as well. Even rumblings that this storm could ramp up maybe back towards hurricane status. It is still 60 miles per hour, so it's right in the middle. But nonetheless, you can see its influence affecting land, and rainfall totals could shoot up through the roof. It's what they've been saying for quite a while. Doesn't look like it's going to be quite as bad as initial expectations for rainfall, but still pretty bad. From what I've heard from people, I've not actually seen recently, but from what I heard earlier today, they say that around 15 inches expected now, and it used to be higher. So we'll get a little analysis of that from our team shortly. But that's the main action in the Atlantic, and there you can see Teddy as well. Wilfred is still a thing too. That is a tropical depression now, and what's left of Paulette could redevelop south of the Azores now. You can see it near the very top of your screen. And there you can see Teddy's progress as well. Another storm that's getting rather close to Bermuda in the wake of Paulette. My name is Nathan Foy. Tonight I'm joined by Ryan and Strat. Good evening to you both.
Evening.
Now, we've been... I think it's just us three here because the rest of the team are have reached their saturation point for activity in the Atlantic. It's a crazy season that's still rumbling on. Both of them are threats to land right now. Beta obviously going to be affecting more people and already has done with the rainfall already persisting over land. Have we got any numbers on that just now?
I haven't seen direct totals yet for the storm over land, but we have seen some footage today from the Galveston area of general inundation from a mix of early squall lines bringing some inundation and storm surge along with the influence of the storm, and just those squall lines and outer bands themselves bringing rain rates up towards half an inch an hour at their peak strength earlier today as they're moving through Galveston and Houston. Fortunately for those that have been impacted by those bands, they continue to head south and west. Those are actually weakening a bit now. The rain rates on those are dropping down towards a quarter of an inch an hour now instead of over half an inch, closer to an inch an hour, which is what they were when they were first coming on shore. But definitely inclement conditions occurring on land well ahead of the storm. And that radar on stream, you can actually see that particular outer band squall line that moved through Houston and Galveston earlier is now heading towards Victoria as well.
And it'll make it to San Antonio pretty soon too, and about later on tonight. But interestingly, we're looking at the radar here. I know it's far out from the radar site, but it does look a little bit flaky on the radar imagery. You can obviously still tell where the center is, and for those who aren't quite sure, let's just do a little annotation here. The center there is around here in the last frame, moving in this direction, and the forecast track takes it somewhere along the coast here, potential landfall zone. All along here, it could do a slow landfall like that, or it could move in much more quickly and then make the turn. We're not sure when that's going to happen just at this stage, but obviously the National Hurricane Center have every possibility in hand. And there you can see quite a jumbo cone there from the National Hurricane Center, the left-hand side, showing Beta's track. And they're really not sure about it. They expect that it could make landfall near, in fact, even further south than where I depicted on that chart, southeast of Victoria, and then hook round towards the east. But the cone there suggests that it could turn almost immediately if it was going to do it straight away, or at worst case to move inland, maybe even as far as San Antonio and then curve northeast.
I mean, I will say that there's a saving grace with it right now, though, is that despite the convective blowups that occurred earlier today with the low-level center relocation and that mid-level eye feature that appeared on radar for a bit, that because its structure hasn't been the best defined, along with it actually trying to move over, is that any spin up it really makes just pulls more dry air into the center. This was noted in the National Hurricane Center's forecast discussion. And if you have some satellite imagery, if not, I'll try to screen share something briefly. It's most visible on infrared, but water vapor shows it pretty nice as well, is that after that initial burst up, the dry air entrained into the center and is forcing that convection to kind of wane down right now. Some of this general features that has been happening with the dry air kind of making the system struggle more than maybe what some were expecting yesterday has really led to this rainfall total forecast to drop off quite significantly, which is very good. The actual latest forecast graphic from the Weather Prediction Center has lowered the total rainfall forecast again. So the Galveston, Houston area is only expecting 6 to 10 inches of rain now instead of 10 to 15, which was their expectations through today. And yesterday, of course, we were looking potentially at widespread 15 to 20 inches of rainfall along that area, with 10 to 15 across much of the Texas coastline.
Here's this infrared satellite loop showing a decent chunk of today. And you can see that big blow up that got quite a few people concerned that it was going to go again, and still could, but just not right now by the looks of things, because that convection's really taking a dive. It's not a sustained blow up.
Yeah, I mean, part of that's because the eye feature never drilled down all the way to the surface. You didn't have a full, eye wall structure come up on radar infrared. It was a mid-level feature. So because of that, it didn't have as much of a way to protect its core from this dry air, which is wrapping around. Although during today, the general outflow of the system, you can kind of see those very kind of warmer cloud tops, which are the ones that are bringing those squalls on shore, extend better towards the north and west of the center of the system than they were yesterday. So outflow has generally been improving, but because the south and west halves are generally bare past the core convection bursts, dry air is still able to very easily circle into the center right now, and that's what's seeing this current wane in convection.
And I can't imagine the rain totals are actually that high over land right now. Rain rates.
Yeah, I mean, the highest rain rate right now earlier today was, closer towards 3/4 of an inch to an inch an hour, with that squall line at its strongest. Right now,
I mean, that's Texas, right? But you can see on...
Yeah.
Oops, I just pressed the wrong button. It clicked a little bit too hastily. But you saw on the eastern side there it is again. You can see a big chunk of weather going on there as well that's delivering probably some rain to those areas that have just been affected by Sally too.
Yeah, and honestly, one of probably the more frustrating things in, finding out what exactly the rainfall totals are going on in much of Louisiana right now is that the Lake Charles radar is still down, if I'm not mistaken, from Laura's impacts a while ago. That radar site got completely wiped.
Yeah, look, you've got more, to be honest,
yet.
You've got more heavy weather on land in Louisiana than you have in Texas right now.
Yeah, and that's been quite persistent for most of the past day and a half to almost 2 days now since the system became a tropical depression, because you've had this southwesterly shear generally ripping convection or keeping it displaced to the north and east of the center. So even though the system's moving now mostly west towards Texas, a lot of the heaviest rainfall is still over portion of Louisiana. That particular thing that you're showing there right now with I'm pretty sure it's the New Orleans radar there.
Mobile.
Those are rates. Mobile, okay, I'm sorry. That Mobile radar is showing rain rates of over an inch an hour across extreme far southeastern Louisiana right now, with other rain rates well above 1/4 inch, approaching 1/2 inch plus per hour coming on shore right now too. So even though the system's going to be moving towards Texas and a landfall is expected there, Louisiana's already seen probably pretty significant rainfall totals over the past couple days as these lines of convection have moved northeast, and that will continue for much of the past day, or next day, I'm sorry. And then unfortunately, when the storm moves north and east, it'll bring more new rainfall over larger portions of Louisiana as well.
So this here is the wide shot, and as we pan towards the east, you can see over Florida this little system as well, which people have been tracking with certain peculiarity, this system, and some people associating it with what was left of Sally.
Yeah, I saw some discussion about that, and I'm sure if Leahy's here, he could probably comment on that too, because, I guess in a similar vein to Omar and how, spawned from,
That's some
a
heavy rain
convective
rates.
burst that, yeah. Basically what happened is, remnant portion of energy that was associated with the front that picked up Sally and dissipated the storm as it was moving over land, split off towards the south and east, moved southwest and still moving west southwest now over Florida, and has been able to get some nice spin up, but
It's
it's
blown
mostly a
up some
mid-level feature.
convection there just as we've got into nightfall.
Yeah, I mean, there's really heavy rainfall over portions of southern Florida with it right now, but in terms of whether or not it'd be considered a tropical cyclone at all, it's mostly mid-level spin right now, generating most of that. You don't have anything closed down at the surface right now, at least, although it does bear some watching
I think it's
if it can
close.
maintain that convection offshore.
It's
Yeah, I mean,
close.
right, was it? I want to see the new update from the National Hurricane Center, see if their
They've got it
8 p.m.
tagged,
outlook.
haven't they? They've got it at 10%. Still
Yeah, if this
10%.
convection persists offshore, though, I'd be interested to see if they try to raise it up
They've
because if
got.
it keeps.
I think they can't not rate. I think. Well, we're running with 20%. Let's say that much. They might up it to 30% when the tropical weather outlook comes out, and that will be in the next 20 minutes or so. Usually they're quite early with that, maybe a little bit longer, and then we'll have the intermediate advisories before the end of this hour for Teddy and Beta. So make sure you stay up for that as well. I certainly will be. And this is Teddy. That's how it's looking right now. What do we make of Teddy today?
Um, I mean, it's persisting quite well despite its latitude and general structural
Is it?
problems that it's had. It's still 105 miles an hour
It's
about.
persisting quite well considering it's not been doing well.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's the best way to put it. It never really reached, the peak that some people were expecting because its structure just never really held together with the eye wall. Combination of eye wall replacement cycles and dry air entrailment. But it's still a Category 2 storm because despite infrared right now looking quite atrocious, the radar features and information that they've actually gotten from planes is telling a bit of a different tale than you might be able to assume otherwise.
And I tell you what, Strat, still not making that turn just yet. If it goes on for just an hour or two, Bermuda could get hurricane force winds tomorrow.
Yeah, and that's why the government there has been urging people not to go out towards the shore because, on top of that potential, if it keeps going west of expectations, there's 20 plus feet waves associated with this rip currents, unsafe conditions coastally, alongside the expectations right now for at least tropical storm conditions too. So, 2 storms in about a week and a half for Bermuda. Not a good time to be outside right now. Any preparation should be complete right now as we head into the evening hours there.
I doubt many people have even unprepared since Paulette,
I'd really hope so.
which is still traceable, and that's what that small plume of convection is to the south of the Azores. That's what's left of Paulette. Still going, and one or two models suggesting that what's left of it will make it all the way to the Canary Islands or to Northern Africa or somewhere exotic like that.
Well, I mean, it'd be quite an extraordinary event if that occurred because what is it? We're in the Greek letters now, so we're at beta. Paulette comes back from the dead and becomes a subtropical or tropical system again, which the National Hurricane Center is giving 60% for. As
Although
of the
it would
latest
still be
advisory.
called Paulette, thankfully.
It still would be called Paulette. That's the crazy thing about it.
Thankfully.
When could you ever expect to have a P name storm active the same time as Greek name storms?
2020.
That's, I guess. And someone giving out a good note for Teddy too. That Canada does have some watches in place
Yes.
right now, tropical storm watches.
That's right.
And some people may be asking, well, the storm is expected to become post-tropical before it makes landfall there, so why do they have those watches in place? It dates back towards 2012 and 2013 after Hurricane Sandy turned post-tropical right before landfall, or was expected to, and they discontinued some of the watches and warnings in the Northeast. That received a lot of criticism, and they changed how they issue watches and warnings to keep awareness and public attention in proper ways so people are preparing in the right ways for systems like this. Because
And that was before the internet became the tinderbox that it is today.
that's true. I mean, right now at least, they're expecting some minor weakening from Teddy in the overnight hours, but they are expecting as it interacts with this cutoff low in a similar way to what Sandy did, but fortunately the occurrence of this will be much further out to sea when it's happening. They're expecting that baroclinic forcing an extratropical transition will actually strengthen Teddy again, back up
Yep.
to 105 miles an hour from there, saying it's going to weaken a bit overnight and then re-strengthen. And a pressure down to the 940s is what models are typically indicating. So it could actually reach its lowest pressure much further north with lower wind speeds than it was having at its actual peak strength much further south.
I am a bit surprised that they've not issued a hurricane watch, though, on that.
I think it's iffy because after it completes the extratropical transition, it's expected to begin winding down pretty quickly.
I know
so
it's
probably
iffy,
borderline.
I know it's iffy, but usually they go cautious on this kind of thing, especially with watches.
Yeah. They might up it tonight to a hurricane watch, or issue a tropical storm warning and then issue a hurricane watch on top of that. I would guess. I can't really say for certain at all, but that would be my expectation. Because right now, at least, they're expecting. I actually got to get the right graphic quickly.
We're just looking at
to,
another image of Teddy.
Yeah, they're expecting it to be a hurricane strength extratropical cyclone just offshore of Nova Scotia, but its wind field by the time we get to later into Tuesday and early Wednesday will be much larger than it is right now as it completes that extratropical transition. I think the only reason they don't have that up yet is because it doesn't fit the proper time frame yet, to tell you the truth. Because that's 2.5 days from now where they're expecting to be just southeast of Nova Scotia. Typically hurricane watches and stuff come up 48 hours before anticipated impacts. I'm assuming they're thinking that the wind field will be large enough that potential tropical storm conditions will arrive within 48 hours, but not necessarily hurricane conditions. There's always a ton of reasons that are going on internally that are in their decision-making process.
I don't know. And this, let's not forget, it's not the National Hurricane Center that issues these watches. This is from Canada, so obviously they're watching it very closely.
Yeah, they went through Dorian last year as it turned post-tropical as Category 2, so I'm sure they're keeping a proper eye on this as well, and that people there will generally be staying prepared ahead of the storm's closest approach.
A reminder of the warnings that are in effect for Tropical Storm Beta then. Currently got winds of 60 miles per hour, a pressure of 996 millibars. Storm surge warning in effect from Port Aransas, Texas to Rockefeller Wildlife Refuge in Louisiana, including lots of bays in between, including Galveston Bay and San Antonio Bay and Aransas Bay and many others. Tropical storm warning for Port Aransas to Morgan City, Louisiana. So that's quite a fair chunk of land there under a warning. And a tropical storm watch southwards to Baffin Bay. So storm surge, it looks like that's going to be a potential issue. It's not, when you think about it being a 60 mile per hour tropical storm, it's not the smallest.
No,
it's had a bit of time it's been stalling for about 2 days, which usually fans out a storm's size.
Yeah, that really is true. Right now at least though, and this was being reported yesterday through those ASCAP passes, even recon data, is that tropical storm force winds were occurring just onshore, barely offshore portions of southern Louisiana, even though the storm's generally been moving not closer to those areas where those winds were occurring most of its lifespan. Right now it's moving very slowly to the west as it's in the midst of very weak steering currents. That's going to even probably slow down a bit more once it moves inland. Could accelerate a little bit in the next day or so. But both Beta and Teddy are having generally expanding wind fields. Teddy especially is going to have that wind field balloon. And to answer a question in the chat as well, the extratropical transition that's going to occur with Teddy will be similar to what happened with Sandy, at least in how it interacts with the low and becomes post-tropical. The difference is that this will be happening offshore, so those impacts won't be happening as the storm comes onshore. It's going to be happening with the storm still well offshore, and then it'll be weakening, but still a very dangerous system as it heads towards Atlantic Canada, begins to move inland.
I'm trying to get a picture here of the... it should display the wind radius. If not, I will draw it. So there's obviously the storm. The wind radius to the northeastern side extends out 170 nautical miles. So if I was to draw it on the screen in line with National Hurricane Center's last forecast, you're basically drawing the tropical storm force winds, wrong button, tropical storm force winds all around here, Not to say that it's certain in these areas right now, but it's possible all round here. Tropical storm force winds and extending right round here and obviously over the storm itself. Much less on the southern side. I've probably given it too much there actually. And back up towards the northeastern side. That's roughly the area of tropical storm force winds. And I'd imagine that the 50 knot winds, the stronger winds there inside the storm, will probably be on the northern semicircle.
Yeah, and those winds, especially the fact that many of them are occurring offshore still, are definitely causing extra rip current risks. Isaac actually just sent me a DM, one of the team members, mentioning a tweet from the National Weather Service's Corpus Christi office, making sure to remind people.
Is he under a watch?
I think he's barely south of a watch right now. Let me double check the location.
Oh, I'm not sure about that. I think he might be in a watch.
Oh, I think he might be barely on the periphery of it, but this really goes for the whole Texas coastline, is that there's a high risk of rip currents in effect through early next week right now as the system moves inland and even meanders just in onshore or barely offshore. The positioning is still not the most certain. For example, now the 18Z GFS wants Beta to come back offshore after coming onshore and then hug the coastline for a bit. So I wouldn't pay most attention to exactly where it comes on shore if you're under a warning or watch zone. Just take the proper precaution and have your plan in place. But also remember that this is not a good time to go out into the water at all. High risk of rip currents, those are obviously life-threatening. And the similar thing can be said for Teddy, too. For not just Bermuda, but Atlantic Canada now, as well as much of the eastern coast of the United States. Those rip currents can be life-threatening. So even if it's good weather right now with some high pressure in general, always better to play it safe, not go out into the water right now.
I must say it looked the part earlier, Beta, but it does look like it's tearing itself apart just a little bit there on those latest frames.
Yeah, I mean, dry air's a real struggle for it right now. I mean, that's really the best way to say it. It's a mix of dry air really wrapping into that circulation and some wind shear, which is preventing outflow from expanding better.
There's a shocker. That area of interest that I think is looking better on the western coast of Florida has been dropped to 0%.
Huh?
Yep.
What?
They've dropped it to 0%.
Excuse me?
Yes.
Wait, did they... Okay, well, I'll read it out here. A weak area of low pressure located inland over southwestern Florida is producing disorganized showers and thunderstorms over portions of the Florida peninsula.
Yes.
Sorry about that. Oh my goodness. The low is forecast to move west-southwestward at about 10 miles per hour over the southeastern Gulf of Mexico later tonight and Monday. Environmental conditions are not expected to be conducive.
Well, it isn't, to be fair.
Well, yeah, no, I think,
I'm just going off how it looks right now. It looks decent. I'd give it a good 10% just to be on the safe side there. But they're ruling me out completely at this point.
Well,
yeah, interesting.
Yeah, well, I think their point with it really is initially they weren't expecting any potential development once it came onshore Florida. Then, of course, it developed a mid-level center over land that is trying to blow up convection over it. The issue that it's going to be facing is, Beta's actual outflow combined with pretty strong wind shear is going to be very inhibitive.
I'll tell you what,
once it actually enters the Gulf of Mexico.
Could you imagine if it did become another storm?
If it did, it would be extraordinary, and I think that would be gamma as well.
Two storms sharing the Gulf. God.
No,
but
it's not happening.
Yeah, the water vapor imagery. I don't know if anyone can screenshot that. If not, I'll try to pull this up very quickly. Give me one moment to pull this up. Right here.
Oh, hold on a minute. You got me unprepared on that one. Let's see if we can get this
I'm
here.
sorry.
Yes, we're
I'll just
on
wait
it.
a moment and pull this up very briefly. You can see, of course, Beta in the center of the screen, and then the area of interest moving off of Florida right now, still over it. But, the most obvious feature is the very strong wind shear cutting from west to east and southwest to northeast. You can see those Beta's outflow being completely yanked that way, across the southeastern United States. When this thing moves into the Gulf of Mexico, it's going to be facing those influences much more strongly than it is right now. The fact that it doesn't have a low-level center at the moment means that it's basically going to be ripped apart is the expectations, because even though Beta's core is pretty small, the general influence from its outflow and the sheer ripping away its outflow extends from its current location near Texas all the way offshore of Georgia and South Carolina, with the trough of jet that's pulling away right now, which if that trough were a bit deeper, you'd expect it to try to pull Beta northeastward right now. That's not happening, of course. But that's really going to probably stop that from doing too much rather than come off of Florida and die.
Intermediate advisories will be out soon from the National Hurricane Center. They already issued their tropical weather outlook. Paulette at 60% of reforming. Let's take some questions then. Start your message with Force 13 all in text. We're open, and we'll see where we end up. They'll all light up in the chat section, and I'll do my best to take as many as we can. But right now we're still looking at the large, increasingly becoming a mess, Tropical Storm Beta. The first question there, will Isaias, Laura, and Sally get retired?
I don't know. I mean, I think
No
Laura's
one
going
knows.
to get retired, but Isaias and Sally are up in the air. But it's possible.
Do you think Paulette will reform?
I think there's... I don't know. I would say that there's a decent chance.
60% is fair.
60%
more than a point.
fair.
Could Teddy
Yeah, a bit more.
re-strengthen due to slackening of shear?
It won't be because of lessening shear. It will actually be because of baroclinic forcing as Teddy interacts with the cutoff low that's going to turn it post-tropical that would
Am I
induce
right
any
in
strengthening
saying,
winds.
did someone even at the National Hurricane Center compare it to Sandy earlier today?
That's in the
Yes.
forecast discussion.
Wow.
It's directly in the forecast discussion.
Wow.
Because it is similar, to be completely fair. The actual way that it's going to interact with this cutoff low get pulled a bit towards
It's
the west
stronger, though.
and deepen its pressure.
It's stronger. Is this going to be a stronger Sandy?
The
good news
not
is
on
it's-
shore, fortunately.
Yeah, not on shore is the good news.
They are expecting that it will strengthen from 100 miles an hour to at least 105 miles an hour from the baroclinic forcing. So they are expecting the winds to pick up marginally, but they are expecting the pressure to drop much more significantly as a result of it. What is it? Right now, Teddy's at 964 millibars.
Yeah, well,
Most models bring it into the 940s as it interacts with this cutoff
Oh,
low.
I mean, stranger
Fortunately,
things
again,
have
to
happened.
reiterate-
Stranger things have happened, such as Umberto being a Category 3 high-end with an exposed center of circulation, so we'll see.
Boy.
Yeah, I think it is important to reiterate, though, just for people to make sure they're really paying attention to this. Fortunately, this actual transition, deepening of pressure, and potential another jog up in wind speed will be occurring offshore, not onshore like Sandy did, for example. And by the time this thing approaches Atlantic Canada and turns post-tropical, the expectations are that it will be weakening because of interactions. Once it completes its full extratropical transition, it'll begin to wind down a bit in wind speed. So it's not going to be strengthening as it makes its closest approach to Canada by current expectations. It's going to be, at least right now, weakening pretty quickly at that point from 100 miles an hour down to 85 miles an hour between hours 48 and 60 right now.
How much rain is expected in San Antonio? I would suggest that it might be 2 or 3 inches at most.
Yeah, I mean, the Weather Prediction Center has their graphics updated usually every 6 hours or so for next 1 to 5 day rainfall forecast. San Antonio is a larger city as well, so make sure you're checking your local weather office for your specific zip code place as well.
I'm looking at it right now, and it appears that San Antonio, actually, according to this graphic, I think this is the one. Yep, this is the 1 to 5 day rainfall forecast. Less than an inch.
Oh,
believe
really?
it or not. Yes.
All right.
Yeah,
well,
it's
you
gonna
can,
be very
you can treat mine as a
track-dependent.
worst case then.
Yeah, the actual rainfall is going to be very track dependent with Beta right now because if it's moves further west than expectations, some of that rainfall might be pulled further onshore. But because the southern and western half are mostly completely exposed because of dry air entrailment and wind shear stripping convection in the north and east, they might barely escape. Make sure though you're staying up to date with the local forecast as well, because any minute changes in the track could bring the difference between less than an inch to an inch of rain. And then potentially getting stuck with 2 to 4 inches of rain.
how long will Houston face tropical storm force winds? If the National Hurricane Center forecast cone verifies, you're looking at the best part of 4 days. 4 days? Not 4 days. 3 days.
It's a pretty long time.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly won't be fun. They're saying right now, Sally's already delivering or beginning to try to deliver tropical storm force winds inland. Or not Sally. Oh my God. Beta. No, don't. Okay, that's
had a long
real quick
year.
at the end of the year. They're saying Beta is already beginning to try to deliver tropical storm force sustained winds to Galveston and Houston. That probably won't change until 2.5 to 3 days from now, when it's forecast to weaken to a tropical depression. And when it does that, it's forecast to do so over Galveston and Houston. So it's going to be basically in the same spot 3 days from now, or just a bit north, really, to where it is right now.
If it's exactly correct, that cone, but don't forget, that cone is a pretty big one. It's, by NHC standards, it's mammoth cone, isn't it? It's huge.
Yeah, and I mean, it does highlight the possibility this thing could make landfall and come back offshore.
Oh, yes.
And then stall near the coastline. That is something not to rule out.
Storms
and
have
does
done that.
happen. Probably elevates rainfall forecast.
Harvey did that, didn't it?
It did, but it stayed inland for like 3.5
I know,
or 4
after
days
it did that, it came out and then it hit Louisiana, didn't it?
It did, and actually strengthened a bit offshore too.
Gosh. Will Sally reform? Well, I'm pretty sure it won't be Sally that gets the name if that's 0%. That's not Sally. So no, Sally is gone for good. Will there be another big storm like Laura again? Well, for that particular area, you can't rule that out until, at least mid-October.
Which region did they say again? I'm sorry.
Well, a region wasn't specified, but a big storm like Laura was the suggestion.
Well, I mean, going into October, another Laura-like storm, I don't know, forming out in either the Eastern Caribbean, Western MDR, moving through. If we were just to assume that it was exactly like Laura, or through the Caribbean, or a little bit north of the Greater Antilles, and then into the Gulf where it becomes a major hurricane. A scenario like that, it could happen, but who knows, honestly? Who really knows?
I mean, the main thing, though, is that now that we're really past, the peak season, at least for, the intertropical convergence zone, as that begins to drift southward again, it's going to be harder to have waves, easily reach far enough north to where, when they're at the Lesser Antilles, they're going to be, at the same latitude as, Cuba and Hispaniola, or without already being pulled off to the east and north earlier. You might have some further south waves get pushed more directly into the Caribbean, or other systems try to form in similar locations. But it's going to be much harder to have an Isaias or Laura-like system, which is a tropical wave, pulls through the northern, Lesser Antilles and goes through the spine of the Greater Antilles. Once we get towards that point in the year,
surely that would only increase their chances going through the red-hot Caribbean Sea.
Going through the Caribbean Sea, definitely a possibility, but I'm trying to say at least, going, horizontally, east to west through the Greater Antilles, probably decreasing odds of something like that from here on out. But, I mean, don't really like the idea of it going into the ocean heat content that the Western Caribbean Sea would present instead.
A lot of them, as we get later on in the season, do recurve, though, rather suddenly at times. So on those islands, still got to watch out from a head-on impact from the south.
Yeah, that's true, because Bermuda High typically tries to lose some of its strength as we really get towards the end of the hurricane season. So at that point, you're not going to have it being so strong to where instead of Laura's initial forecast recurving it and trying to have it come towards the eastern coast of Florida, instead it pushes all the way through the entire Greater Antilles into western Louisiana. That's kind of the situation where you can have a storm spin up in the Caribbean Sea, gain some strength, and then get pulled northward as a combination of either Bermuda High being weaker or troughs cutting deeper in across the United States and pulling eastward will try to pull these systems up and north. So just because you don't have a system as likely to kind of move through all of them, all the Greater Antilles east to west, doesn't mean you can't have significant impacts on any of those islands.
Now, we've had a few questions about this potential African wave, and I think I can see it there on the bottom right-hand side. Doesn't look too bad, just northeast of the Cape Verde Islands. NHC haven't marked it. I don't think it has any model support, so I would rule it out.
Yeah, I mean, that was when they had marked it up to 30 to 40% a couple days ago, but odds of development basically dropped off as it was getting closer to coming off the coast of Africa, and they're not really expecting further development from it.
Interesting. Do you think Teddy might change path and hit New York City? I try to say that with a straight face.
No,
not at all. If this was a week ago and you were saying that, it would have to be taken a bit more seriously because there's much wider uncertainty. But there is a very high level of certainty on how Teddy is going to interact with this cutoff low right now. It's not expected to get pulled so harshly that it would come all the way to New York. That would be a deviation, I think, of, let's see. That'd be a deviation of almost 600 miles from the expectations right now, which if you use the forecast cone for that time period, would have to be, I think that's about 4 or 5 standard deviations out of expectations, which to give you a sense of comparison, anything more than 2 standard deviations to the left would have a 2.5% chance of occurring.
All right,
if you're
Strat,
talking
we
about
get it.
5
We get
standard
it.
deviations, that's nil.
We get it. Do we see Medicanes becoming more likely in the future, Strat?
I mean, it feels like there's been more of them in the past decade. I don't have, all the history behind it, but I feel like, just based on rough assumption,
We've got to be very
and
careful
I'm sure
because
there's cyclone historians.
every little storm all around the world, if they're in slightly odd places, are getting a lot more publicity than they used to.
That's true. Mass media is involved a lot in getting extra promotion. Hey, look, there's a lot of storms like this, in places that you wouldn't normally expect.
The one we just had did cause damage, but they did go all out on that, didn't they?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the difference is you can say, oh, well, the sea surface temperatures will probably continue to get warmer in the Mediterranean Sea, but at the same time, as the Sahara Desert, is likely to continue expanding, then you're going to have the issue of potentially more dry air reaching up into the, Mediterranean Sea. So there's multiple factors in it. I'd refer you to any research papers that are available, to talk about those potential, possibilities in the coming decades, really.
Oh, now, looking at latest Teddy imagery, eye clearing slightly. A ragged one at that, but interesting to see. That's Teddy right now. Obviously after dark there.
Yeah. Well, not the most surprised seeing eye trying to clear out now, though, because it was noted in the forecast discussion that despite the pretty abhorrent satellite appearance from earlier, that other indications, including radar, older plane data, would show that an eye was still actually very well defined beneath that. Which is why they actually were able to hold it at 90 knots, 105 miles an hour, despite it looking pretty terrible earlier today.
Do we think there'll be a Category 5 this season? I really did think that Teddy would do it. It didn't.
Well, I'll say this. If there was to be a Cat 5 this year, which there is still a possibility, I would place bets on it being a Mitch or Wilma kind of like system that forms in the Western Caribbean. I'm not saying that's going to happen or it's going to be as strong as those 2 storms were, but it's a possibility.
Yeah, I mean, you're kind of reaching the end of the proper time frame where you'd have a main development storm, form, in the tropical Atlantic and become a Category 5, before other impacts. I think it was a year ago yesterday, or a year ago, a couple days ago, that Maria became a Cat 5 right before Dominica. This is kind of closer to the end of the time frame. Well, I'm not talking about for the basin as a whole. I'm talking about main development storms coming in. Then now we got to watch the Caribbean Sea in October. But if we really get towards mid to late October and there isn't a Category 5 yet, the odds of such a system occurring will probably begin to decline much more sharply.
I would rule it out after we pass the same point of the timeline that Wilma did it.
I think that was the 3rd week of October, right?
Around the 18th,
second week of
19th, it was a Category 5,
Sorry, 3rd week then.
October 19th, 2005 was Wilma's Cat 5 peak.
Yeah, so if
I
we
think
don't
anything
really have...
after that would be less than half chance, let's say.
Yeah. Obviously, though, as we enter October, computer models long range right now at least are not really saying too much for the Caribbean, fortunately, for the next couple weeks, although some hints at potentially a gyro-like system down the line. Although that's still, way too out to say with any certainty, of course. But I'd say in general, based on, climatology and history that we have, keep an eye out on that region if you want to potentially see the stronger storm develop in the next month or so now.
Radar looking a bit bare there. Looks like, again, the circulation is dragging itself apart. I mean, I can't confirm this because the radar is still a little bit out, but maybe weakening signals. I'm not sure. We'll get a comment from Devon in just a moment, but first, John would like us to get the National Hurricane Center on the phone and have them justify making the Florida disturbance a 0% chance.
Well, read the tropical weather outlook. They explain the reasoning there.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty good synopsis.
Can we get them on the phone?
I'm sure you could call them. They might not pick up, though.
No, I don't. They'll be a bit busy. Do we think we'll see another Katrina, more like, strength cyclone in the South Atlantic in our lifetime? Look, the fact that it's happened before, when we've only been looking at the South Atlantic since around 1970, so we've really only got 50 years, and that's 1 in 50. So my guess would be yes. Devon, welcome. If he's there.
I think he's still muted right now, but he's in the call, so I'm sure he'll jump in soon enough.
All right.
Excuse me, I am muted.
Oh.
Thank you, Strat. Yeah, I don't really have a whole bunch of time here, but I thought I'd drop in for a couple of minutes to figure out what we've got going on here. I assume this is all between Teti and Beta.
Yes.
Mostly, yeah.
Mostly, yeah. Alrighty. So yeah, just really quickly, the rainfall is expected to be really significant from Beta because it's going to stall while moving inland. The Weather Prediction Center is actually taken off the rainfall quite a bit from Beta, which is a very good thing. Before it was looking like potentially 2 feet of rain was going to come ashore to the southwest of Houston. But now, let's see here. Weather Prediction Center has a maxima of around 12 inches to the south of Louisiana. The unfortunate part is, of course, the same areas that just got hit by Hurricane Laura are once again going to receive significant impacts from Tropical Storm Beta here. At least 4 to 6 inches of additional rain, maybe more if the orange band shifts to the north all, which it very much could. So very unfortunate timing for this storm to be coming through and then being pulled back to the east. And what's pulling it back to the east, you'd say? Well, we've kind of got this monstrous storm over in the Atlantic by the name of Teddy. This thing just looks to be an absolute monster. It's scaring the hell out of me, honestly. Right now, I believe National Hurricane Center predicting somewhere in the range of a 70 to 80 knot landfall in Nova Scotia, which for the size of the storm would be utterly ridiculous. They're expecting it to weaken for a little bit, then re-intensify as it moves past Bermuda. That's what most models have been saying. And then it's going to deepen while undergoing a post-tropical transition and become a very powerful cyclone and very large cyclone over the northern Atlantic, to create probably one of the most impactful storms to hit Atlantic Canada in a very long time. If you remember back to Juan of 2003, the winds would be less than that, but Teddy would be such a much larger system that it might create bigger impacts than that.
And still in Bermuda, the storm is still yet to make its turn, and I think, Devon, a few more hours and They might be forced to put out hurricane warnings.
With how large this storm is, considering that the hurricane force wind field's only going to expand, it's only going to get larger from here. I think it would be appropriate. I could see Bermuda getting at hurricane force gusts from this storm. I don't know about sustained hurricane force winds, but definitely hurricane force gusts, and usually that's enough to put out the warnings.
Yeah, and I also want to show something, just so you know, kind of the unprecedented nature of what could happen with Teddy in just about 2 days from now. There's also recon passes with it. Some computer models, and just generally, something like this would be rare enough to mention, or multiple actually, including the GFS and Icon, and I'm pretty sure a couple others are saying it as well, are indicating that there will be a precipitation band extending from Teddy all the way down to Cuba into the Gulf of Mexico and trying to connect up all the way with Beta.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yep.
and it's going to have an eastward component that will go all the way out to the Azores and connect with the remnants of Paulette and Alpha in the northeastern Atlantic.
God.
Oh my god.
In a way, Teddy's kind of holding the whole family of Atlantic storms together right now.
Well, it's not doing it right now, but it's likely to become that in the next day or two. I know a lot of people say don't go ahead and compare this to Sandy. I don't think this is going to be as powerful of a storm as Sandy was. That was an extremely anomalous and crazy storm.
But even NHC mentions Sandy's name.
Oh my
Well,
god.
if the National Hurricane Center is mentioning Sandy's name, maybe then go ahead and say it. But I can definitely say that this is going to be a very Sandy-esque storm with this monstrous post-tropical cyclone transition that this is expected to undertake, and the gargantuan size value that it's going to have when it runs into Atlantic Canada. When you take a look at the CDPS values for size, the only storm that's going to rank higher than it is Sandy.
Wow.
As of right
Wow.
now. So, gargantuan storm that this is expected to be. I think that's really the only way to describe it.
And that's
And it
Teddy.
is quite fortunate. I was going to say it is quite fortunate, though, that even though the National Hurricane Center is explicitly saying in forecast discussions that the transition interactions will be similar to Sandy, with very quick deepening and an increase in maximum winds, that's going to be occurring offshore as it turns extratropical and then beginning to wind down a bit as it moves into Atlantic Canada. Still is a very powerful storm nonetheless, but Sandy, of course, was doing that as it moved on land to the United States.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Sandy did peak like 12 hours before landfall, so it was weakening. I was moving ashore, but it was still a very powerful storm. This is expected to weaken a lot quicker than Sandy did. So, it's not going to be as deep. Sandy was 940 millibars. I think models are in the mid 950s with this storm, if I recall correctly.
I think it could be.
just
I
about.
think it could be mid 940s though.
It definitely could be. It definitely could be mid 940s, but I think it's safe to say low to mid 950s for right now. Reasonable.
I'll
for
say
this
about
storm.
950-ish, a little above that for when it gets its closest approach and potentially makes landfall in either Nova Scotia or Newfoundland. They actually the maximum wind speed around there at about 80 to 85 miles an hour. So that in itself would actually be pretty similar to Sandy's actual wind speeds when it was moving onshore. The main difference will be a bit of a higher pressure hitting, fortunately, less populated areas, although, of course, it's going to be a very bad storm for Atlantic Canada if the models come in. So everyone there should obviously be preparing, nonetheless. And the wind field will probably be, very large, of course, but still not as large as Sandy's was as well.
Now,
it would be surprising to me if this storm is able to get as large as Sandy, because again, Sandy was that's a ridiculous system, but this system with this leftward hook, this massive cold air intrusion, and the gargantuan influence that's going to have over the entire western half of the Atlantic Ocean, you could clearly see the comparisons being drawn.
Absolutely. It's really something that we need to be looking at.
Ryan, I believe you have some recon news from Beta.
Yeah, we do have some recon here. Just pull it back up here. Yeah. So it looks like nothing too significant from what I'm seeing. Flight level winds in the northeastern quadrant at about 50 knots. And then current SFMR readings are between 45 and 50 knots, but it looks like the pressure is right at about. Let me just see what they got for the pressure. They got 996.
So it's virtually the same then.
So basically, beta is maintaining its intensity. It's not strengthening or weakening at this time.
That's,
Yeah.
I guess, better than what it could be.
Yeah, I mean, that generally fits in the the forecast consensus. You could make an argument that maybe it was a little bit stronger earlier today, about like up to 5 knots, but it's obviously degraded in appearance and structure since then. So, it may, and this is what the forecast discussion did say as well. Wax and wane 5 knots or so between certain strengths, but that people shouldn't really be paying attention too much to that, because specifically with beta, the largest threat to land will of course be those rainfall totals that will be coming on shore and lingering for several days.
I think I want to bring up X Paulette, and it's 60% chance right now. What's your guys' opinion on that?
It was discussed briefly earlier, but 60% seems about valid for it, because models are generally trying to say it'll redevelop, and develop at least subtropical characteristics. But the fact that it's probably not going to have the largest window to do so anymore, after 2 days conditions will be less favorable if it doesn't develop by then, is going to make probably the next 24 hours the most important in its lifespan, at least in regards to redeveloping right here. Other than that, if it really does redevelop and hold itself together longer than expected, maybe the Canary Islands or other places have to watch it, somewhat closely. But the general consensus from models is that, after about 2 days from now, it's going to encounter harsher conditions, a more stable air mass, higher wind shear, and begin to degrade and probably dissipate before it reaches the Canary Islands.
Ryan, the radar suggests that the circulation might be getting quite elongated. Are you seeing that from recon?
From recon. Let's see here if
satellite suggests it might be the case. Radar is more convincing that could be what's happening there. Very interesting.
Trying to have a look.
And the band moving through Victoria now in Texas.
It's really.
I could pull up a screen share of the latest, recon flight if you want to, because although it's looking like that, I'm pretty sure there's still pretty well defined low-level center of circulation.
Just curious to see how it's been evolving on the radar.
I mean, I just pulled up the recon flight data so far on my screen share. I'm sure Leahy's been keeping track of this as well, and can give a better synopsis of it.
Alright, yeah, we're still quite a tight center then. The updates out on Teddy, hurricane hunters are in there as well. 105 miles an hour, pressure of 964, sort of kept the same intensity, probably waiting for the data. And we'll see what they think of beta very shortly. We've got beta right now, and it's still the same as we expected. 60 miles per hour, pressure of 996, no changes to warnings. So we are literally as we were an hour ago. No new watches and warnings, no new intensity changes. So we're exactly where we were.
Maybe that seems mundane to some, but at the same time, that means what you're still looking at is 2 storms ready to impact land imminently and are already doing so. Teddy's starting to impact Bermuda and it's going to head up towards Atlantic Canada. Beta is already impacting the southeastern United States and is going to head into Texas and then stall at a meander. So just because you aren't seeing, many statistical changes in, their current intensities and whatnot, or changes in the watch and warnings right now, does not mean that, either system active right now are any less of a threat than they were before.
So there you have it. To reiterate those warnings then, for Tropical Storm Beta, a storm surge warning for Port Aransas, Texas to Rockefeller Wildlife Refuge in Louisiana. Tropical storm warning for Port Aransas to Morgan City, and a tropical storm watch for Baffin Bay to Port Aransas, Texas. For Teddy, tropical storm warning in effect still for Bermuda. I'm a bit concerned that they might get stronger winds than that. Tropical storm watch for lower East Pubnico to Canso in Nova Scotia. A significant chunk of the southeastern coast there under a tropical storm watch, and that will probably be upgraded maybe tomorrow or late tomorrow. And they also mentioned dangerous rip currents forecast along the western Atlantic beaches for several days. Do you want to give a quick mention to those effects?
Yeah, generally the swells that Teddy's producing, as it was, much stronger as like a 140 mile an hour storm a couple days ago, and still now is a large system, and when it keeps that extratropical transition, it'll continue to produce these large swells that, as they come ashore or get near coastlines, will produce life-threatening rip currents. So generally, if you're along the eastern seaboard of the United States, northern coastlines, the Lesser Antilles, Bermuda, Atlantic Canada, it's best to avoid going in the water for the next couple days, even if the weather might be great in your area. It could be risky. Even if a storm is thousands of miles away, it can still produce life-threatening conditions and end life with rip currents. We saw with Lorenzo last year, for example, which is way further out to the east than Teddy is right now. Multiple people end up, unfortunately, losing their lives because of rip currents along the U.S. East Coast. So pay attention to that, and if you see localized warnings telling you, hey, this isn't safe, make sure you're not going in the water. Similar thing can be said for portions of the Gulf Coast on top of that right now with Beta as well, because that will be causing enhanced rip current risks and surf as well. So if you're along, Texas, Louisiana, basically all of the U.S. coastline that's not California, Oregon, or Washington, it's best to not really go in the water for a couple days, even if the weather's great.
And just a final note about, well, actually, look at the satellite imagery there. It looks like it's waning even further on the satellite imagery. I'm not very impressed with Beta's appearance. It's obviously good news, potentially. But what are we thinking about its track? Do we think it's going to stall over land? Because it started stalling at sea. The longer it stalls at sea, the less energy it's going to have to stall on land with rainfall amounts and all that. What do we really think is going to happen now?
It's really just a shot in the dark. I think currently I trust what the NHC is putting out there. Maybe it might not stall 100% to what they say, but I do feel like there's at least some stalling that will happen.
The actual steering situation is incredibly complex, because not only is it between, two areas of high pressure, a trough lifting away, and another one that might be coming down, but potential interactions between Beta and Teddy are complicating the track forecast. That's why there is quite a large cone. And, keep in mind that when you see that cone for Beta right now, at day 3, it could be, just over Galveston, but, anywhere from that to much further inland or even out, over the water again, as a couple miles are indicating. The exact location will have, more direct implications for actual rainfall totals and total impacts for certain areas. But regardless of that, that means that if you're under a warning right now or in that, or even outside, changes, making sure you're acting on your hurricane plan right now if you're under a watch or warning, so you can stay prepared and ahead of the storm.
Absolutely.
Well, that just about sums up our stream for this evening. Beta and Teddy on the way. I won't be here tomorrow night, so I don't know if anyone else will be taking over. We'll see what happens with that. You can find out the latest updates on our social media platforms, Facebook and Twitter, and of course on our YouTube page. We'll give you all the latest updates and schedule of any of the events that we're doing. And then I'll be back here Wednesday to do more coverage and commentary and get the 24/7 stream back running. We're currently performing upgrades on that. In the meantime, you can of course contact us through those mediums or participate in our still growing Discord server, discord.gg/force13. That's where a lot of the community appears to be gathering right now. It's a fun place. Highly recommended, I think. In the meantime, Beta is getting closer. I almost said better then. How about that? And Teddy is obviously getting close to Bermuda. It could be a second hurricane impact at worst, just days after Paulette's first, and then on to Canada. That's all for now. We'll see you again soon. Good night.